This is the first episode in a 5-part series titled How a Biased Slavery Narrative Was Weaponized Against Western Civilization. In this series, we will challenge the dominant historical framing of slavery, not by denying its horrors, but by exposing the selective and weaponized way it is presented today. We will explore what history really says, not what ideology wants us to believe. Episode 1. The Truth About Slavery, a Universal Human Tragedy. What if the history you've been told is true, but only partially true? What if you learned that slavery wasn't the unique crime of one people, one continent, or one race, but a universal, global institution practiced by nearly every culture for millennia? Slavery did not begin in 1619, nor was it invented by Europeans. This is not a fringe opinion. It's basic historical fact. Yale historian David Bryan Davis, in his Pulitzer Prize-winning work, The Problem of Slavery in Western Culture, states clearly, slavery was a virtually universal institution. It was practiced in every major culture and civilization in world history. In ancient China, entire populations of enemies were enslaved following conquest. In India, the caste system enforced forms of hereditary servitude for centuries. The Aztecs practiced ritual slavery and human sacrifice. The Greeks and Romans, often idealized as the fathers of Western civilization, built entire economies on slave labor. In Africa, slavery existed long before Europeans set foot on the continent. It was embedded in local economies, political structures, and cultural norms. Tribal leaders waged wars to capture slaves. Victors enslaved the defeated. Some societies used slaves as currency, as tribute, as a sign of wealth. As historian John Thornton notes in Africa and Africans in the Making of the Atlantic World, African participation in the slave trade was extensive and often voluntary. Africans controlled the supply of slaves to Europeans. When the transatlantic slave trade began, Europeans did not storm into the interior of Africa to capture people. They arrived as customers. African kingdoms like Dahomey and Ashanti had already built systems of human trafficking. Europeans simply became the latest buyers in a long-existing market. But even this is only part of the picture. Far earlier than Europeans, the Islamic world had already built a vast and brutal network of slave routes. From the 7th century onward, Arab Muslim traders transported millions of black Africans across the Sahara, the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean. Historian Ronald Siegel, in his book Islam's Black Slaves, estimates the total number at over 17 million, nearly double the number traded across the Atlantic. These African slaves were castrated, often forcibly converted to Islam, and dispersed across the Islamic Empire from the Middle East to India. Meanwhile, another forgotten group of slaves filled the markets of North Africa, Europeans. Between the 1500s and the early 1800s, Barbary pirates operating from Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli raided European coasts in search of slaves. They took an estimated 1 million white Europeans, men, women, and children, from France, Spain, Italy, and even as far as Iceland. Entire villages were depopulated overnight. Coastal regions were abandoned for fear of raids. Robert C. Davis, in Christian Slaves, Muslim Masters, writes, more Europeans were enslaved by Muslim North Africans than Africans were ever taken to North America. But ask yourself, how often do you hear this mentioned in school textbooks, documentaries, or cultural debates? The Western narrative of slavery is not just incomplete. It is deeply biased. It singles out one civilization, one era, and one race for condemnation, while ignoring or downplaying slavery elsewhere. It suggests that slavery was something done by white people to black people, rather than a tragedy of humanity itself. It is not only unfair, it is historically false. We must remember, the transatlantic slave trade was horrific, but it was not unique. What made it exceptional was not its brutality, but the scale and efficiency brought by European powers during the age of exploration and empire. But even more exceptional was what followed. Western civilization was the only one in history to develop a moral, political and religious movement to abolish slavery. Not because it lost a war, not because of rebellion, but because of principle. Abolition began not in Africa, not in the Islamic world, but in the hearts and minds of Western thinkers. In Britain, evangelical reformers like William Wilberforce fought a decades-long battle against the slave trade. The British Royal Navy devoted enormous resources to patrolling African coasts and intercepting slave ships. In the United States, despite its many contradictions, abolitionist movements grew strong enough to ignite a civil war. In France, the Declaration of the Rights of Man inspired the eventual abolition of slavery in the colonies. And this is where the narrative truly breaks down. Because today, the very civilization that ended slavery is the one most aggressively accused of it. Today, white Europeans and their descendants are told to carry a unique, collective guilt for a practice that existed everywhere and was ended by them. Meanwhile, the Islamic slave trade is rarely mentioned. The African role is whitewashed. The ongoing slavery still practiced today in parts of Africa and the Middle East? Ignored. What does this tell us? That the narrative of slavery is not being used to teach history. It's being used to assign moral blame, to fuel resentment, and to dismantle the foundations of Western civilization. It has become a weapon, not a memory. And we must ask, who benefits from this? If Black history is presented only as a story of victimhood, what does that do to Black identity? If white children are taught to feel ashamed of their ancestry, what does that do to Western confidence, unity, or progress? What future can be built on resentment, distortion, and guilt? This is why we must tell the full story. In this episode, we've seen that slavery was not a white invention. It was a human institution, brutal, ancient, and tragically universal. And yet, only one civilization stood up and declared, "This is wrong." In the next episode, we'll explore why slavery was not the root cause of today's inequalities, but rather a symptom of much older structural vulnerabilities. And why recognizing this is not dangerous. It's essential to truth and to real healing. History belongs to no race, but false narratives? Those belong to ideologies. If you found this video valuable, please take a moment to like it and subscribe to the channel. It helps us reach more people and keep producing thoughtful, well-researched content like this. This series takes a great deal of time, effort, and investment, especially in sourcing and studying serious historical works. If you'd like to support our work, you can make a donation through our Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Every contribution helps us keep going. And if you're interested in reading the sources yourself, you'll find affiliate links to the books we cited in this episode. Purchasing through those links also helps support this project. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode.